speaking to Steve Eastaugh, the Norwich United manager, on the 6th of January 2021. The government, as you're well aware, Steve, announced on Monday that there was an indefinite national lockdown, effectively, which means the suspension of all non-league football. Obviously, the nation's health must take priority, but given the current situation, do you think the league season will be completed?
It's. I think, like you said, Joe, the everyone's health and well-being absolutely rightly takes priority. I don't think the Prime Minister's announcement on Monday was any real surprise to anybody who was following it in terms of the data and the infection rate, and then what that does to the emergency care beds. It was always inevitable that was going to happen. So in some ways, it's until we've tackled this situation that we're all facing and impacts everybody. In many ways, it doesn't really matter what happens with football because it's not a priority. My personal opinion on can it be finished? Yeah, absolutely, it can. For me, it will come down to probably not the clubs, but the willingness of the league to handle this in a way that they've never had to deal with something before. And if they take a rigid approach to it that they have done at other times with other things, then no, it won't get finished. But if they're a little bit more open to the fact of, well, let's finish it and then worry about what comes next in terms of starting the next season, then absolutely it can be done. Whether we finish in May, June, July, wouldn't bother me, and it wouldn't bother the players. I guess the argument would be around holidays and things like that, but they're all barriers that can be overcome, and if we then start the season a little bit later, again, so be it. I think for me, if we weren't able to finish it, you'd have to question, well, what was the point in almost restarting it, to throw what would be sort of 12, 13 games away. And again, and the other end of the spectrum, okay, of promoting or relegating teams after that, even on a points per game basis, don't see much point in that. So for me, to show a degree of flexibility and finish the season would be my preference over anything else.
Okay, so you wouldn't see much merit in points per game, even over the 2 seasons or over 1 season or anything like
that? Is a preference over scrapping it in its entirety, yes, but I'm well aware of that. My opinion on that will be biased because of where we sit in the table over where others do, and I think we're in a period of time where consideration also has to be teams just being able to survive and clubs being able to come back and function and engage with their communities, and that all has to restart and be viable again, first and foremost. So yes, that would be preferable, in my opinion, to scrapping fixture for results again. But my preference overall would be let's get it finished, and if that means 2 games a week, then let's play 2 games a week. If that means in some cases we're playing towards the end 3, then okay, that would be preferable to me. I think that the challenge that the leagues may have would be that everybody's not synced now. Obviously, the Premier League, the Football League, and the National League have continued, and rightly so. and then we've got real fragmentation in terms of how many fixtures have been played below that. I still think with good levels of communication and good levels of collaboration that can be overcome. And I still think you can have a situation where leagues are starting at slightly different points going into next year. Still, I think would be achievable. The two things there around communication and collaboration, we haven't seen high levels of that through the league system to date. And I think that what we do see is the fractious nature of the bodies that govern the game. And I don't think that is, I think that's to the detriment of the game. I don't think that helps us at all when we have situations like this. But I am an optimist, and I do, always sort of believe that there's a way, and that would be my hope that they could get together and find solutions to make that happen.
From what I can see, you've been doing everything you can to safely get games on. Not every club is doing that or has been doing that. Has that been, do you think that's going to be an issue in trying to get the games finished? Do you think every club actually has the motivation to do that?
I think we are obviously operating in completely unprecedented times, and there's no rule book for this. And I mean that in terms of every entity and every organisation within the whole structure has had to do what they believe is right at that period in time with the information that they've got. And you're dealing with institutions of full-time people, that the FA, and obviously at anti-level, and you're dealing with institutions that are fully led with volunteers. I don't take anything away from volunteers, but there's a very different level of operation across the pyramid. And you will get, and you do get, people that have got different driving factors in their decision making. And I think it's difficult to be critical of people acting in what they believe is the best interests, because I'll give you an example, Joe. You might have a club locally that their official group, i.e. the people that run the club, are all made up with volunteers who are in the over 65 demographic, which would put them at high risk. And people see the playing staff and the management staff are all 20s, 30s, and think, well, why don't you get the game on? It's more complex than that, and I don't think it's right to be critical of people for making the decisions that they believe are right at the time. I suppose in some ways we've been quite fortunate, yes, at Norwich United, that our outlook has always been, well, we will follow government guidance and we will aim to train and get our fixtures on when possible. And that has been our approach to it. Not all clubs are as fortunate to do that. So again, do I think people have stretched the rules? Yeah, of course they have. And I think whenever you have governance that is interpretable, if you like, rather than law, then that will always happen in any given situation. But I would like to think that in the main, moving forward, and whether that be the next sort of 6 weeks, 8 weeks, once we get to that position where it's generally accepted that it's safe, or as safe as it now can be with those most vulnerable vaccinated, that the majority of football clubs will want to do what football clubs are set up to do, which is play games. That would be my hope anyway.
I mean, when you're in lockdown periods, does that effectively mean contracts are on hold? I mean, is that how it works? Or the contracts paused and then they pick up whenever the season resumes? And if you're talking about the season going into September, would that mean potentially the players, deals expire at the end of the calendar season, if you like. Is there anything you can give us on that, sort of how that works?
I suppose the real contractual intricacies of it would probably be better for Neil Wood in terms of that. In terms of my understanding of it, is the contract runs to the end of that current season. How we've approached it with the chairman and with the players is clearly, if the season, if you like, ends up being a 12-month period, it's unfeasible for the football club to have paid us the terms of our contract for 12 months. Caveat, and that with the football club will have not had certainly the consistent levels of income that it would normally have, and sponsors, benefactors also may have had their core incomes affected by COVID. So we very much take an approach of, we will pay our players to the end of whatever the current season looks like. But where we've had the lockdowns, so November, for example, we haven't paid the players for that month. We will have paid them for December. We won't pay them for January. But the likelihood is the season then will be extended, and therefore they will then get paid what they would have been paid in November, in May, June, for example. That's how we've approached it. I know other clubs have furloughed staff, furloughed players. I know other clubs that have just said, look, we can't pay. And I suppose where we're at, look, this isn't anybody's livelihoods. This is not anybody's core income, certainly at our level. So I guess we've got the flexibility to do that. Next to league, maybe not, and I think it's got to be a club by club approach, really, because different clubs are funded in different ways, have the capability to do different things, and some clubs, their core income is reliant on their facility being open during the week for whatever that might be, community interaction. So that's how we've looked at it. We are fortunate in that we've got a group of players that trust us, and I've not had one player who's come and questioned the approach or the stance that we've taken on that. And I think in general there's a good degree of understanding that this is bigger than just a football situation.
Yeah. Okay. So we did manage to get 2 games in between lockdowns. Might seem like a while ago now, given we've had Christmas, New Year, and lockdowns since then. But looking back at those games, we first had the league trip to Witton. That was after a few postponements. So that was good just to get a game in, I imagine. But what did you make of the Witton game?
Yeah, it was a dying game, really. It's in hindsight, it probably shouldn't have gone ahead, just because the pitch was waterlogged. I left Witton obviously pleased that we'd got a win, but there was nothing I enjoyed, and I don't mean that in a football context about our performance. I thought we were very professional. We did what we needed to do, and we got a good 1-0 win against a hard-working side. There was nothing I enjoyed about everything that surrounded that game. The facilities not being open, couldn't get a cup of tea. The dugouts were waterlogged. The 4 floodlights were out. We're changing in a mobile classroom, and I'm not being disrespectful to Witton, because obviously they were trying to get the game on as much as we wanted the game on, but you're almost pushing it to the extremes of it was it was like a Sunday morning game of football. You know, it didn't. There was no extrinsic value or enjoyment that I took from that experience at all. And I would probably imagine, well, I know the players felt that way, and I'm guessing that you as a fan also would have experienced that watching the game itself. So I must admit, I thought I was thinking on the way coming back that if this is what it's going to be like, should we really be playing games of football? Because the whole experience that should be going with this, that is why we do it, just isn't there.
Yeah. Okay. So then we had the trip to Wellingborough, which was a bit more. I mean, presumably that was a bit better in terms of match day experience. I mean, for whatever the rules are and such like, you know, they had a sort of outside bar open and things like that. And, so how did you think? What did you think of that game?
I think we approached that game in the right way. I think we felt and still do felt that it was a good draw for us, and how we'd set up and the team I was able to pick, I was confident of winning the game. Clearly, the big moment happened after 8 minutes, and you know, Sean is a very experienced player, and he let himself down and he let us down. I don't have any qualms with the decision from the referee, and you know, Sean's obviously apologised as you'd expect him to, and we move on from it. You know, we've had a conversation as a group and with him, and it's one of these things you accept. That said, yes, that was certainly an influencing factor, but I still felt that there was other moments in the game that we didn't manage well enough. In a game that we had really gotten ourselves back into, and certainly when they got the goalkeeper sent off, I could really see us kicking back on. Super disappointed with the second goal, because that was something that we spoke about at half time. We'd highlighted the near post in swinging corner, and again, two experienced players in the captain and the vice captain not managing a situation that they should have dealt with. So it was a very disappointing result, because even right up until the last minute, I think we were demonstrating, you know, our ability to dominate them, which we'd done for most of the second half. And on another day, we quite easily could have equalised and taken that to penalties, but wouldn't have deserved to do that because of our poor management of situations prior to that. So that was a real kick in the teeth for us, because I honestly think with the situation, how it's panned out, that we could have advanced to quarterfinals of a major FA competition, which for some of those boys may not get that opportunity to do that again. And there was palpable disappointment from the group in that. That said, flipping that into a positive, I would probably say, coming from that, the learnings, certainly from our debrief on the following Tuesday, we will have learned more from that experience. Obviously, we've got to put that into practice, but we will have learned more and highlighted more than probably any other game this season. Because we debrief every game that we play, and sometimes you can allow the result to mask things that aren't right, and that's why we always try and have a debrief where we can be constructed with each other, and players can communicate what they feel and how they saw situations, and it was a really good, honest debrief. There was plenty said by players, and there was a real sense that it was a missed opportunity. So look, hopefully that we'll be better for that experience, and it's just a shame, obviously, that we've not been able to go and play another game straight after.
In that game, they were the sort of goals we don't usually see Norwich United concede, really. We obviously had Burwood joining a few days before the game. Was that difficult for him to settle in? Was that a very last minute switch? And is he sort of a long-term signing? Do you see that as a long-term thing, or is it more just to help out over a few weeks?
We had to move on that one simply because Ryan Dickerson has got a knee problem that he's now gone for a scan on, which has been going on for months. We'd hoped it settled, but we feel that he may have a tear there in his meniscus. He's gone for a scan, which we're still waiting now on results. So with Andy Wilton's availability, it was one that we had to go and get a goalkeeper in, and Jamie at Lowestoft was really helpful in making sure that we could get a dual registration. So as far as I look at it now, I've got 3 goalkeepers, each with their own sort of challenges. So I needed to make sure that we were covered in that position, and that's why we've moved on that. I certainly wouldn't. I certainly wouldn't put anything in terms of the performance at his door. No, for me, you're right. They weren't Norwich United goals that we conceded, and it wasn't managed like a performance that we've seen prior. That can happen, Progress is not going to be in a straight line. We accept that, but there were probably 6 or 7 things on the day that I felt that we didn't manage properly, and that's too many. 2 or 3, even Sean's sending off, that happens in isolation, and then we manage everything else around that. I think we can deal with it. I think we can cope with it. Doesn't make it acceptable, but there's too many of them. In the end, we, not the opposition, made the task too difficult for ourselves, and that is frustrating, because if a team comes and outplays you and beats you, you can hold your hands up and say, look, they were better than us. But I feel that probably 7 times out of 10 we would beat them, and the telling factor for us, and again we spoke about this in the debrief, was their reaction at the end of the game was one of absolute euphoria. Their dressing room was rocking, and all credit to them. But the telltale thing for me was that they didn't expect to beat us, and that's why that happened. So yeah, you have to accept that. We will lose games of football, but we've lost that one in a manner that for me and for the players it is not acceptable.
Fair enough. Just to touch on what you were saying about the debrief on the Tuesday, I find that quite interesting. As a fan, you sort of imagine players lose, the team loses a game, and the manager spends half an hour talking to them after the game and telling them where they went wrong. Would you go into details after a game, or is it best to wait until training?
It's something that I'm quite. It's probably something that I've learned through playing, coaching, managing. The detail isn't there at the end of a game. There's too much emotion, and you actually end up with lots of noise. I don't mean that in a volume context. I mean it doesn't sink in, because people are still very emotional at the end of that experience. And I also think there has to be for learning to happen, whether that be good or bad in terms of that experience, there has to be an element of reflection. And 2 minutes after that experience has happened, there is no reflection. And you have to have, for me, to get real good detail in terms of learning experience, you have to have that honest reflection. So I know that if we attempted that process after a game, we would get, well, what about that? And what about him? And what about you? As opposed to, I didn't do that, or I thought I did that really well, but I have thought about how I could have helped him more, and we could be better in this situation. If we, it's just that it's a much more higher level of information that we're able to share. We're able to really pick out some key things, and sometimes it's things that we don't do as a group, and it might be that I speak to individuals about, but we do like to just have that time just to sit and reflect, and I think that's really important. That's not to say that we won't say anything after a game, but it's certainly the Tuesday night debriefs will always be at a much more constructive, reflective level.
Okay, lovely. And just, I guess we're now at a, well, not far off a halfway point. Not quite that in terms of games played, but we'll see this as a sort of halfway through the season point. I mean, obviously with results, it's been pretty positive, but how would you reflect on the season to this point? And have there been any players that have surprised you or sort of stood out and done things you weren't expecting from
them? I think in the main, our performances have been very, very good. I think our results, probably most importantly, have been very, very consistent. And I think that's, as a manager, I think that is something that you're always searching for, is almost the ultimate performance. But in doing that, if you know that you can not be your best and still get results, that certainly gives you a lot of security. And I feel that we're able to do that more often than not, is find a way to get a result. And I think that's partly down to the experience that I've got in the dressing room. And I think it's partly down to the way that we've set up the side and coached the side, and giving them security in different situations, that they know what we default to. In terms of individual players, I think there's not a player there that hasn't performed, because, and being brutally honest, if there was, that they probably wouldn't still be there. Just, not in a nasty way, just in a natural selection way, they wouldn't be getting in the side. And if you've got a team that's playing well and winning games of football, then generally all the parts of that are doing what we've asked them to do. But I've seen lots of players who have grown in many ways, in terms of the levels of responsibility that they've taken on, in terms of their performances. So I think a good one for me is someone like Dylan, who probably last season was played in several different positions. Again, pre-season, early part of the season, did so for me. But now is delivering a level of consistency in his performance. Is he where we want him to be? No, not yet. But we know that he's on a path of progression. And I also know, and we've had conversations with each other, that he will be a future leader in that environment and for the football club. So, he's one that's really pleased me. As of other, I mean, again, someone like Jordan Forbes has been played in a number of different positions, some because we've needed him to, some design particular aspect of his game. And he's just, for me, he's got better and better and more consistent. And we trust him now to go and perform in probably 4-5 different positions, and have no fear whatsoever about throwing him in to different scenarios and different games, because we trust that the level of performance we're going to get from him. But I think you can say that about pretty much every player in that group. Hayden Davis is another one that I would probably highlight. Again, played in 2 or 3 different positions, and you see after a run of games and a level of understanding of what we want from him, some real, high quality performances, consistent performances. So, yeah, I think individually, I've been very, very pleased. And for the players, it's been so difficult because the stop-start nature is not what you want. You want that rhythm, you want that consistency, and you want that next game. And you've got to be very, very disciplined to stay sharp and stay as ready as you can be. And the group last lockdown ran the equivalent to Middlesbrough and back in kilometres, in terms of the fitness challenging that we gave them, because they wanted to be ready. And we face another situation now where we'll be doing exactly the same, and because ultimately that's all we can do at the moment. That's the bit that they can do, but that could be the difference between being there at the end of the season and not be, because now is an opportunity to do something that maybe other players, other teams won't be doing.
Yeah. And that's where, you talked about the attitude of the group and how keen they are to keep fit and stuff. And that must be more important in a season like this than ever. I mean, obviously it's always crucial, but having that trust where you can rely on them to keep up during the lockdowns and things.
Yeah, it's everything. It's everything at every level, but especially this level, I think, because you will see players on a weekly basis with more talent, but they're at this level generally because they've not been able to apply it, and their attitude, for whatever reason, has not been where it could have been. But we're very fortunate in that we have players who do have good attitudes, and the group self-polices, if you like, that, the standards that they set themselves, and the bar is high. And if they didn't, they wouldn't get close to the group, let alone the 11. And I think we've got an honest group in that regard.
Great. If you had to pick out the best performance of the season, or even the most enjoyable game of the season, what springs to mind?
Oh, that's a good question. I think different parts of different games for different reasons. I was very pleased with the Stowmarket draw, because we had 10 men, and although it wasn't probably the most exciting to watch from my perspective, how disciplined we were to still see out the game and keep a clean sheet. I think the best that we've probably played would have been our second half at Galston, where I thought we absolutely tore them to pieces. We changed a few things at half time on that night, and yeah, I thought we absolutely destroyed them in the second half. I was really pleased with our again probably more so our second half performance at Hadley away. I thought we were really good on that afternoon. Bizarrely, again, I thought there's two home games that also stick out. Again, not because they were our best performances, but in both these games, Woodbridge at home and Mildenhall at home, we found a way to win the game. And in both of those games, we could so easily have drawn them, but we found a way to win the game. So yeah, I like to try and take something from every performance, because I think even in the games that haven't been great for us, they're sometimes the ones where you learn the most. So like when we drew at Ely 0-0, you know, I learned lots that day. I will have learned a hell of a lot from losing at Wellingborough. We even going right back to the first game of the season, you know, losing against Hadley when we thought we'd kind of cracked it. You know, so I suppose for me, there's learnings and there's things that you like and things that you don't like in every performance, and it's just trying to keep getting progressively better, but understanding that you're never going to get consistency to the absolute point, but you'd have to say we have reached a high level of consistency in certainly our league form.
Yeah, absolutely. And that does chime with what you were saying in the summer about you're not going to get consistency necessarily out of everyone in the 11 in every match day, but you need a level of consistency of 9 or 10 who can drag the others along. That kind of thing.
Yeah, I think
that's really shown in the performances, I think.
Yeah, and I think coupled with that, because you aren't going to get that level from individuals, you have to have huge degrees of flexibility in many ways, certainly in game, and I think that we've definitely got that in terms of our both individually and as a group, the understanding that not only do we need to be flexible, but also our mindset around when the time comes, we can deal with that very, very quickly, whether that be change in shape, whether that be players playing in different positions, whether that be somebody starting, somebody else coming in. This isn't a group who, you know, sulk. We don't have players who sulk, or we have quick thinking, high level understanding in those areas, and I think that because of the consistency, I think that is a real differentiator for us in terms of other teams that I've seen.
Yeah, I mean, you promised flexibility in the summer, and you certainly haven't let us down there. I mean, I think the last 2 games there's been first half substitutions and things. Finally, what are you and your staff's plans for the coming weeks, and what can you do to keep the players motivated and fit during an indefinite lockdown?
Yeah, no, we'll have a couple of Zoom meetings as we did in the last lockdown. We try and make the fitness as interactive as possible. So we have an app that we use, and this week they have been set some individual challenges just to ease them back in after Christmas, and then from next week we will have everybody will be split again into 3 teams, self included, and we make it competitive. So we're against each other, and you get certain points for different challenges, and we have dawn raids where teams get up before 6 o'clock put loads of kilometres on the clock for you to wake up to, and then points and just general sort of camaraderie that brings, and then from a social aspect, we'll have a couple of Zoom meetings to keep everyone there. We've said that if boys want to go and do a little bit of technical, they obviously can use their hour their hour exercise in with another one to go and do a little bit of ball work. So that's what we'll be doing. But again, obviously they're still managing their lives around that, their work commitments. Obviously, for all the guys now who have children, will be their childcare and their homeschooling commitments. So, they've got other priorities now that be stacking in, and we've just said to them that do everything that you can, in a realistic way, I think that's the right approach, the sensible approach. I have to show a realistic degree of empathy that's what's going to be achievable for them, and then looking forward, obviously, to when we can all get back together and start playing football.